All right, so replacing all the wheels on this deck. Up first is this wheel right here. It's kind of wallowed out and everything. I think the rod itself is fine. So how we're going to do this is there's the end over here is actually stationary, it's square. So just a 15 millimeter wrench and you should be good to go. This is a really simple replacement. The problem with this is a lot of times this wheel right here gets caught on sidewalks and stuff and it chips out on the inside like you see here. The only reason I'm replacing this thing is because I think it looks terrible. This wheel is somewhat expensive. I think it's 23 or 27 bucks, something like that. Well, actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to go clean this up, this pin up. This pin does have some wear on it, you know, not a huge deal. The pins are cheap enough. Let me see if I can get it in here. No, got it cleaned up. So I'm gonna go clean this up and then we'll come back and install the new wheel. All right, so got this cleaned up a little bit. Now we should be able just to drop it in there, get it all nice and square. And tighten her up as soon as I can go. Like I said, ideally you'd replace the pin. I can't remember how much the pin is, but that works. That looks a lot better than that crappy old thing, so we can throw, missed the trash can, we can throw that away. Up next, pick up the camera here. Up next, we're going to replace this. Now what I'm going to do, because I want to make sure that this grease zerk right here is accepting grease. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take off this, I've got to get a pair of pliers to do that. But I'm actually going to take off this spring right here and I'll take everything apart, clean it really good. And then after I've cleaned it really good, then I'll put the new deck wheel on. After I put the new deck wheel on, then I'll put it back on here and I'll grease everything really good. So let me take the spring off and I'll just set the camera up when I'm doing that and we'll go from there. Go ahead and pull this pin right here and we're just going to drop. It takes a little bit of tension, but we'll just drop that like there. Now we can drop this out. Ooh, that's stiff. Ooh, that's awful. There we go. All right. Well, let's wipe this off real quick. And we can really see how many hours on this thing. Not very many. With the maintenance this machine received and that deck shaft, that caster wheel shaft still looking that good, I mean there's barely any wear there. I mean you can slide your finger up and down it without catching your nail on anything. So I'm gonna get all that cleaned up and then we'll replace the wheel down here. All right, one of the things I like to do, I've got the shaft cleaned off and everything. Looks really, really good. Backs up the low hours of the tractor, even though its appearance is not all that great. Another thing I like to do is I like to get all of the old grease out of this tube right here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to use a screwdriver. You're never going to get all of it out, but you can at least get most of it out. And that way any dirt and debris in there, you're going to start fresh. When you put new grease in there. Like I said, this isn't required. This is just something that I personally do when I do this to machines, because you know, ultimately in the end I want a machine that's going to last, and obviously in this particular case it has not been well cared for to date. what I'm doing is I'm actually poking it through the bottom now. But you know, like things like that, let me make sure you can see it on camera. So things like this right here, that's just string or something that was in there. Big old mess of it right there. Something hard. Obviously, that would not be good if you're doing something and the caster wheel's turning a lot. It's going to wear the caster wheel down, or it's going to just reduce the amount of grease that can be in there. So it's not perfect, but you know, now it's a little bit cleaner. Takes you 30 seconds to do it. Nothing all that bad. So that's just something I like to do. You don't have to do that, but you know, it only takes a couple minutes to do. So I'm going to get set up to put the new caster wheel on there. Alright, so get this caster wheel off. Just got to prop it up. Just a matter of, I think they're 18 millimeter. Yep, I was right. And then you just got to, typically it's not that hard, but naturally it's going to be that hard this time. Not that much. Alright. Alright, let's watch this thing fall apart. There we go. Alright, so bolt, wheel, parts and pieces. So clearly that was junk. Nice thing is there's no wear, or there's very limited wear on the, around the, see if you can see it here. Oops. They're gonna fall over. I really do not like this tripod. So there's limited wear in here, right here, which is limited wear in here, right here. Wow, that was repetitive. But anyway, there's no wear, which is really good to see. So now we'll get the new one put on here. Naturally, it comes all wired up. With the washers, so take it like that. I'll put it on here. Now, one of the things you'll notice is there's still going to be play in here. So what you have to do, you use these washers right here. I believe that was what this is for. Let me go look at a parts diagram and make sure that this, I think these are correct. I ordered the parts and now I can't remember the parts diagram. Alright, well after quite a bit of fighting with this thing, I figured out that I actually have some subbed part numbers that weren't quite right to what used to be on here. So what I did is, and I can't remember where I left this, but I had some washers and stuff that would have worked on the old style. I don't know if I didn't get the serial number right, but I went and looked at another 60-inch deck that I have, and it's set up the same way that this one is. I don't know if it's been replaced or not, but what I've got, and the ultimate goal here is to make sure that this deck wheel does not wobble in the caster here, because if it wobbles, then it'll wear out faster. So this one's nice and tight. There's nothing wrong with it. And to double check that, what I did is I went ahead and rebuilt a back one here, and it's just like it should be. So ultimately, it all worked out with the parts that I have. But it goes to show you that sometimes rebuilding these casters is a little bit more difficult than you would initially think, because it's not just replacing parts, because in some cases, you know, like I'm finding out, things don't fit right. Ideally, these big thick washers here would go over the bearing in this one to take up all the space, but for some reason they won't. And maybe they shouldn't. I haven't rebuilt any of these wheels in the last couple years. But I mean, like I said, the end goal is to have a wheel that does not wobble, in which case this one does not wobble. So that is our end goal. Now, Took quite a bit of hardware to get there, and it took me a little bit of a process of elimination. But you can see I actually reused one of the spacers that was in there. So, I mean, that's perfectly fine. And here's all the other hardware that I forgot, the seals and stuff like that. The old thrust washers. I don't know what that part number was. 14M7401, I believe. So, and then the old bolt. No, that's for the other wheel. But, yeah, I mean, it happens like that. Not a big deal in the end. Because I mean, you know, ultimately I figured it out with the other wheel. So I'm gonna go ahead and on video I'll rebuild that wheel right there. All right, let's rebuild this caster wheel because clearly somebody let it drag on the ground for quite a while, which was kind of dumb. So what you need is you need a 15mm ratchet. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing here. As I drop it on the ground. Now, one of the reasons I like to replace as much hardware as I can on these parts is because honestly, putting rusty hardware back on doesn't do any good because it's just going to continue to rust, and every time you take it on or off, it's just going to present more and more problems. Alright, so we have a bolt, we have a washer, we have a thrust washer, we have our wheel, and in our wheel we have a seal, a bushing, and a bearing. There's two seals. This seal is gone. And then we have another thrust washer, and then we have our big thick washer. Then we have our shaft. All right. Now what I'm going to do, because I don't think this is assembled correctly for the new wheels, is I cleaned all that off like that. I'm going to go ahead and put a new one of these on here, just so it looks okay, like that. Now the next thing that goes on, we're going to take our new wheel kit. Like I said, it is cheaper to buy the wheel kit than it is to buy the individual wheel and the bearing, etc. Which I think is kind of interesting. Alright. Now, take this thrust washer, put on there like that. That's the way it's supposed to go on there. Now, what you want to do is you want to make sure that your grease zerk is on the outside. That's why I'm doing this like this. Put that on there like that. Now I'll sit back down. And we had a washer. Alright. Like so. And then I'm going to go ahead and add one of those thick washers like that because that is what the parts diagram shows. Now you may not need to do that. I'm not sure why the parts diagram shows it like that. That's what the parts diagram shows. Make sure we're going to flip it around here. And then I'm going to put our washer. This is a replacement for this washer. And our new bolt, M91371. Stick it in there. And I can tighten it up. Now this is where it gets a little challenging because you want to make sure everything's lined up. Takes a little bit sometimes. Something like that. And then tighten it up. Like that there. So now, it's a little bit different than it was assembled to begin with, but doesn't wobble and it spins really nice. Now all we have to do is grease it. The seals are in there and everything else. So that's how I rebuild the wheels. Get up here and we'll look at everything. That way you can get a bit closer view. Like I said, ultimate goal is to make sure the wheel does not spin back and forth or does not wobble back and forth. This one the way I have it set up does not wobble back and forth. This, I believe, is what the parts diagram shows. So, but as long as it doesn't wobble back and forth, that's all that matters. Now what I'm going to do, because these are somewhat expensive, I'm actually going to take these and I'm going to keep them. I should have an extra, should have 2 of them, possibly 3. And then I don't think I'm going to keep any of this stuff. Certainly not that. But now all I have to do is put the deck back together and we should be good to go. So I'm going to do that, get the deck down, and then if I got to clean the drive shaft, and then we can maybe hook the deck up to the tractor.